Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining the Journey of Development topic of leadership capacity. The goal for our program is to facilitate a meaningful learning experience and a discussion that is engaging and helpful to professionals within HR, talent development, and organizational development, focusing on the learning and development environment. The format of our event will allow each panelist to share their experience and knowledge of how to effectively employ broad-based, skillful involvement of leadership throughout the organization, where the entire organization is moving in the same direction as it relates to mission, values, and goals. Before we start with our panelists, I would like to introduce myself and Scrimmage. As a continuous learner, I feel engaged and empowered learning from the experience and wisdom of my network, as well as sharing my experience. The Journey of Development events is a way for me to continue my own personal development and support others with their development and growth. I am excited about being a part of the Scrimmage team because of our innovation and collaboration, not only as a company culture, but through our products and how we collaborate and innovate based on the feedback and strategies of our clients. If you are not familiar with Scrimmage, our technology is a one-touch-point platform that nurtures and drives your learner's experience. Extremely flexible cloud-based technology that can operate standalone or integrate with your legacy systems, and offers features such as white labeling and auto-enrollments for early adoption and use. Simple and intuitive user interface for ease of use and quicker learning proficiency, as well as engagement, reinforcement, and collaboration tools, all while providing easy-to-access real-time reporting. Let me know if you're interested in learning how Scrimmage can support you in reaching your strategies and objectives after our program today. Our first panelist is Kylie Ensrud. Kylie serves as the Chief People and Compliance Officer for Alivation Health. She is an experienced HR executive with a demonstrated history of working in innovative environments and has over 15 years of experience in leadership coaching, culture transformation, organizational development, and driving change initiatives. She is in the final phases of obtaining her Doctor of Education degree in transformational leadership and specializes in social, cognitive, and collective leadership practices. Currently, Kylie is conducting research in the area of neurocognitive leadership and synergy development.
Well, first off, thank you so much, Nicole, for inviting me to share a little perspective. You know, Alivation Health is a smaller organization that, if anybody works in healthcare, it's a really unique challenge to really collaborate, work together because of the interaction that providers have with patients or front desk staff or nursing. Everybody's busy all day, every day. And so to be able to scale and get everybody on the same page and sort of moving in the same direction requires a lot of discipline, but also an intentional focus, which we found we really begin from the day they step in for our selection process. It really starts with the leadership group in the room, and we call it synergy reliant leadership, and really fostering the same principles for every single person that walks through the door, and not just our managers or leaders within the organization, but really collectively place that responsibility on the shoulders of each person. And we've been fairly successful, or really successful, at being able to really maximize and leverage the unique abilities of each person to really form that synergy from everybody's unique talents and strengths. And so a little bit of how we do that is sort of what I want to share with you folks. We really focus on, in our selection process, for our core values, which most organizations have and select by and coach by and give feedback by, the drive, passion, discipline, humility, and openness. We decided when we were developing our core values that they really started with the executive team, not because we're the best, but if we couldn't live these every day, nobody else would believe us and nobody else would live them either. And so instead of putting core values out there that sounded good or that maybe others had within the organization, we said, what is deep within our core of ourselves authentically that we can, the minute we step in the building, know that we are modeling for everybody else. So it really starts with those, and every person that comes in the door, they believe in those too. And not cookie cutter talent necessarily, because we want to maximize, like I mentioned, the unique talents of everybody, but there's a lot of different ways to have drive, and there's a lot of different ways to have passion. And so bringing on people that are as different as possible within those contexts. So we are very fortunate because we are a mental health facility, outpatient, we're integrated care as well, so primary care. We have access to some technology that actually looks at how your brain processes information, which most organizations don't. So I'll throw that out there. We do use that, so I can tell you how you focus, how you pay attention, how quickly you process, do you take more time, those sort of nuances. But within that, we follow the Discover, Connect, and Influence model, if you will. And really what this does is we believe that in order to influence others across the organization, you have to be very, very aware of yourself first. And that takes, for some, took for me, I know, a lot of checking yourself at the door, and it's a big pill to swallow sometimes. Feedback's a gift, but that doesn't mean that it's not hard. So getting folks to a place where they really wanted to hear from others, they craved that feedback, but understanding who they are and what is unique about them that we have to try to exploit, if you will. Because I don't need a whole bunch of innovators in the room. I need an innovator and a pragmatic person and, you know, an idea person. So what is it about those unique people that if they walked out the door, that team dynamic would change significantly because of who they are? So once we go through that process, it really is that connecting with others. So with that shared leadership, that collective cognitive leadership, really taking, you know, brain science principles, theories, and connecting with others, creating a social environment where casual interactions occur all the time, building roles, building teams, building departments where there is no executive leader, there is no front desk person. We're just each playing our own unique role because of what our particular talent is in order to move the organization forward. And so within our organization, you don't find a lot of division in terms of hierarchy, if you will. You know, people that are the entry front lines are as important, if not more important than me on most days. They're the first point of contact for those patients. And so it really is that greater network through those connections. And we found once you have those connections, it becomes much easier to influence. And it's a simple concept on the surface. You know, a lot of organizations do it. A lot of organizations believe in it and know it needs to happen. I think what sets us apart and why we've been able to make it work is that is almost 100% of my job is making sure that that happens from the moment that they step in for an interview. It's a daily thing. It's an ongoing thing. And we build programs around it for different parts in people's career. And so it really is an intentional focus all day, every day. So just to share, you know, in the brief time I have, the little components of that go into each of these, just to give you an idea of what we focus on in terms of scaling that leadership across the organization. Really that discovery piece, like I mentioned, that authenticity, really figuring out who you are, what makes you passionate, what triggers you in a meeting when, you know, you get frustrated or defensive, what makes you come alive. We do that through a variety of ways. We use emotional intelligence assessment from MHS, the EQI. We also use our EEG technology to look at brain processing. And then we utilize a lot of the transformational leadership elements. And then we put them in situations where they have to have social interaction. so that they can discover themselves through that. That may be 360 feedback. It may just be time with your peers, time with other groups, but really helping them understand different situations. After that, they go through what we call the connect phase. And this is really where we enable them to make decisions, share power, managing sort of the mindset around who we are, what we do, and what we want to achieve, and then encouraging them to grow. So whether that's participating in one of our programs, or whether it's them fostering outreach for something that they're passionate about that doesn't have to do with Alivation, but maybe it's something that's just going to help them feel connected in a bigger way. And then really once we go through that influence. So like I mentioned, those core values, you have to believe them and have to live them every day naturally. It can't be something you have to intentionally think about, but that just is. And so making sure that those folks are modeling the way, that every leader is modeling the way, and then sharing that power. You know, really collective leadership is about shared power in the elements that you know that you're uniquely great at. And then that change leadership, being able to influence change, which is much easier when you have those relationships and know that you're there for what you uniquely contribute to that larger network within the organization. It's a lot easier to accept maybe the things that you're not great at, but maximize what you are great at. And then here's some of the things we deploy. It's a little small, I apologize, but you know, those tactical elements that we have found really work with folks, and it takes a while to get through all of this, but it's really an entire journey for that person on their onboarding experience. Sometimes it's 6 months, sometimes it's a year. It just depends on that individual. But EQI assessments, a brain assessment, we do reflective interviews. We talk with them about their thoughts, perspectives, what it means to be a leader outside of that manager title, which doesn't matter necessarily. We do a lot of collaboration and discussion, so learning sessions, peer-to-peer. We do situational simulations. You know, let's act out this particular instance, and what is your natural reaction? What are you feeling? But we also videotape people. And it's amazing when you start videotaping people in situational simulations, and then you do a reflection session and give them feedback. And I just had an instance with a manager of ours. She got very defensive when people were giving her feedback. She said, "That's not how it came off. I was prepared. You guys don't understand." And a week later, I showed her the video after she went through, processed all these emotions and didn't change her mind after a week. And then I showed her the video, and she looked at me and she said, "Oh, I guess I know what you're talking about now." And so it's really powerful to be able to make those connections, because you may not internally feel it, but your social interaction with others, they're perceiving that. And so that's been very helpful for us. Making sure the team dynamics are there. So within the executive team, we don't have everybody that's off in the clouds ideating all the time. Making sure that we have all the elements in place to avoid groupthink and to make sure that we're maximizing those components within each individual. And then we have peer accountability partners. So really that person that can be comfortable calling you out or reflecting with you, helping you understand maybe when you're succeeding, what's going well, what's not, and being honest in terms of, hey, you maybe weren't leveraging your piece of the puzzle at that particular time because you were, you know, being defensive, or you weren't willing to change, or you weren't willing to be part of the team. And so it's great to be able to have that, I guess, informal mentor partner. And then reflection. Anybody in our organization that has a formal manager title or leadership title, higher up, we do leadership journals. And they have been extremely helpful in fostering social and emotional intelligence. and nobody reads them other than the person. But documenting situations just to reflect on, wow, I handled that really well. What was great about that? John partnered with me great on that. Why was that? What was that social interaction like? How do I contribute to others in order to lead further? And then we all have individual growth paths for everybody. And so those are really those tactical ways that we share that leadership experience so that everybody in the organization, whether the front desk or our CEO, has that power to be able to lead, and we trust them to be able to lead because we've been very intentional throughout their development, but very intentional on why they're here too. And that's just a little bit about, our approach to shared power, shared leadership throughout our organization.
Awesome job. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. Our next panelist is Patrick Lott. So Patrick is a thought leader in organizational change, operations management, team building, entrepreneurship, and core business disciplines. Patrick focuses on turning cutting-edge research and thought leadership into practical solutions to real-world challenges, often lending specialized knowledge as a consultant and advisor to multiple respected organizations. With that, are you ready to take it away, sir?
Certainly, ma'am. Thank you. Awesome. So thank you, to echo Nicole, thank you so much for the opportunity to get on here and share, discuss, and do some collaboration with some leaders as well in the group. One of the things that I'll take a few minutes and just talk through are kind of what we're doing at Frontier. We're going back to some very grassroots type of processes, introducing this idea of culture and organizational culture, aligning with organizational strategy and those things coming together to really determine quality business results. We've gone and think of an organization, right? We're almost 30,000 employees in 29 different states, and have really never aligned on what are our core competencies, what are the capabilities that we look for across the different levels of leadership and whatnot. So to focus on what are we looking for when we think about leaders and we think about the future of our business and what our strategy and culture and those things come together. We use the foundation, kind of like the driver for our motivation. If you're familiar with primal leadership, you've seen this before, this leadership equation. The level or the quality of your leadership effectiveness ultimately determines associate satisfaction, which impacts customer loyalty, which determines business results, right? So with really focusing on culture and a leader's role and responsibility in culture, because we know that leaders determine the culture and the culture determines the next level of leaders, we went back and said, what are we as an organization? What do we really stand for? What does our culture represent? What does it look like? If someone from the outside came in and said, here's what I think you guys are, here's what I observe, and then how did that align to what we wanted to be? And that's what got us on the process of really diving in and saying, okay, where do we want to be as an organization in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years? What does that look like, and how do we make the most impact here? Well, the study in primal leadership talks about if you can follow the business equation, you make a 1% improvement in service climate, you get a 2% increase in revenue, which doesn't sound like much, but if your organization is generating a simple $1 million annually, that's $20,000 of immediate impact to the bottom line annually. So if you can imagine your organization, right, it's $1 million, it's $5 million, it's $20 million, whatever it is, that 2% increase in revenue becomes a significant win, an immediate win in the business results column, right? So how do we make this effective 1% improvement in service climate? We focus on the leader because we understand that 50 to 70% of that service climate comes from the direct leader. This is tangible meat to that whole people don't leave companies, they leave managers statement, right? So we wanted to put some meat to the bones and say we understand that if we can get a minimal improvement in our service climate, in organizational culture. We know it's going to have a direct impact on the business and the revenue of the business, especially when we start looking at 28,000, 30,000 employees. That's huge. So how many people do our leaders have an opportunity to impact? And looking at that 50 to 70%, again, if you're generating $1 million in revenue a year, you get a $20,000 increase in revenue because you improved your service climate by 1%. More than half of that, or half to 70% of that, is totally based on the leader in the room. So if I can effectively develop each leader, I'm going to get at least half of that return or half of that increase because I put the effort and energy in the right place. So thinking from this mindset and understanding business results are important, right? They keep the lights on. They keep us all in our roles. They give us opportunity to do things in our lives. If we really want to get the best business results, we have to go back and we have to start with leadership effectiveness. And so we came up with our leadership competency model, or leadership capabilities for Frontier. We start with self. The foundation of leadership is effectively leading yourself, effectively managing yourself, growing in certain areas, being able to walk the talk, for lack of a better term, right? When we started doing some polls, we started rolling out some training and different things. A common theme that we were getting across the board was, well, is my leader going to go through this? And oftentimes as leaders, we're great at looking at the external things. We look at the technology gaps, the systems issues, oh, my team, or but we've got to start with the person in the mirror, right? We've got to start there. So we sat down, we had lots of interviews and lots of conversation. I mean, what are the core things that we need to be aware of? What are the things that as an individual, regardless of my role in the organization, what are the things that I really need to spend time in developing and honing? And there's a long grocery list, right? But the three things that we really felt were most important for us as an organization were adaptability and resilience. And in the work that we do, you move at the speed of technology, right? I say it's life at the speed of business. And technology moves faster than we can keep up. So as individuals, we have to be flexible. We have to be able to adapt based on circumstances, based on technology shifts, based on the climate that's going on outside of our organization. We've got to be able to adapt and respond to that. So we know that for the most part, people do not like change. They're resistant to it. They have issues with it. How many authors out there have made phenomenal lives based on this idea of accepting change? So adaptability and resilience. Personal accountability. Accountability is not a burden, it's a privilege. So when we think of accountability, oftentimes people get this negative connotation in their mind about, oh, it's documentation, or it's, oh, I got to have a negative conversation, or whatever. Going back to feedback is a privilege, but it can be hard. Personal accountability says I'm looking at me first. It's that mirror glass principle, right? If everything's going great, I'm looking at a mirror, and everything's going poorly, oh, that mirror just became glass. I'm looking through and blaming everything. But it really should be a mirror when things aren't going well. So where am I? Is my say-do ratio balanced? I say what I'm going to do, and I do what I say. If your ratio is anything other than 1-to-1, you've got some areas to improve. So personal accountability, leading yourself, holding yourself accountable, both in oh man, I've failed here, I made a slip up here, or I missed this. Let me make that right. Let me own it. Let me move on. And at the same time, being able to say, man, I'm doing well. I recognize what I'm doing well, and I'm going to continue to strive for those areas to improve, so that others see that in me. Because people will first follow what they see before they follow what they're told, right? So I need to be able to put that out there, that others see that I hold myself personally accountable. If I'm having a difficult conversation with someone, they know that it's not just about them, that I would do the same thing for myself. They can see that behavior. And then self-development. This idea of leader as learner. You should consistently and constantly be investing in your own personal growth, your own personal learning, because times change, organizations change, people change, technology changes. All these different things are constantly occurring. So we need to be able to grow with those things. So making self-development a priority. There are studies out there that you can, DDI has done a couple of them that look at separations by role, and then stack ranking individuals in each role by salary from lowest to highest. And the amount of self-development is consistently a piece that separates those from the bottom end of the salary to those at the top end of the salary. So helping people understand that self-development is a constant thing. You don't just arrive. So you have to continually be involved in growing yourself in the space that you happen to occupy, in your ability to communicate, in your ability to connect and lead. You have all these different areas that you can continue to develop in, and keeping the mindset that I've got to continue to do those things. After leading self, we move into the space of leading others. And this is that, again, demonstrating the people excellence piece, the power of leadership. At the end of the day, leading is about leaving a legacy. And I know that if I'm a leader today, I'm defining this culture that's going to build the leaders for tomorrow. So this is the evidence of it. I get a chance to impact and influence the lives of others in a positive way. So this can really be the kind of the rubber meets the road, right? The action that I take and I'm putting in, now we're getting some traction through others. And same thing, we have these three competencies of leading people, collaborating and influencing, and building people capability. They go kind of hand in hand with the leading self piece, right? In leading people, I'm helping them grow their capacity for what they do. I'm helping them grow their capacity for connecting and building with others. I'm helping them become that next level leader, that next round of leader beyond my personal space. Collaborating and influencing, at the end of the day, work gets done because of relationships. So we've got to be able to effectively collaborate and influence individuals and groups inside of our work structures to get the work done. You can't just come in and be the bull in the china shop that demands people do stuff and whatever. You've got to be able to build effective, meaningful relationships with people so that you can genuinely collaborate and influence the work that gets done. And then again, building the people capability piece. People get promoted oftentimes, this whole idea of the Peter principle, right? We're all familiar with this. I was good at the job, so therefore I'll be good at doing the job of leading others that do the job. And we know that's false. So as we focus on building people capability, it's not just how effective they are and how good they are at doing that actual job, but it's helping them grow and develop the transferable skills of leading others that do the job. Because it's a very significant shift. And most people, I think one of the most recent studies said 79.1% of frontline leaders fail in 12 months because they don't have that piece. They were great at the job, so they got recognized with a position to lead people that do the job. And sure, they could do the job. That's why they spend so many extra hours in the office when they first get promoted. That's why they say, oh, it's just faster if I do it myself, because they were never built the capacity or the capability to lead others in how to do the job effectively. So really looking at building the people capability piece so that we don't run into those issues. We're not a part of the statistics that say, oh, they fail in the first year because they were never taught how to lead. So we really focus on, hey, what are our high potentials? How do we identify them? How do we get them into a development program? How do we identify where they want to go in 5 years? Not just saying, hey, you're in IT, so you're going to stay in IT forever. Maybe there are other things that they really want to do. So how do we do that? And so building that people capability is looking at leadership across the role of leading, not just the function or the department they happen to serve in. So that's our next step. And our final step is leading the business. And this is the demonstration of business excellence. It's the evidence of leadership. It's the proof. It's the result of effective leadership. We look at I've groomed myself. I've invested in myself. I was given the opportunity to influence and lead others. Now I'm responsible for a function inside of the business. And I never leave the leading others, leading self component. Those are a part of my journey all along. And now we start looking, okay, let's move up another level. So how do I think strategically? How do I gain the foresight to identify problems or issues or opportunities, right? The whole SWOT analysis type thing, looking at that piece of it. And then driving results. The driving results goes back to building people capability. It goes to what's happening with the bottom line. It goes to a multitude of things, not just the numbers. So when I really think about driving results, how do I get results in the business? How do I get results in the people? And then lastly is leading change. Again, adaptability and resilience. People most of the time are resistant to change. So if I'm a leader in the business, what is my role in that change? Am I just a champion for the change? Am I a thought leader? Am I a strategic partner in the change? And how do I communicate that effectively to my organization? How do I be in that space and serve the responsibility that I have in that? And what we find, right, people say the one constant is change. What we find too often is that while it makes it constant, people don't intentionally go out and find ways to get better at it statistically. There's a pocket of people that will. But so really looking at what is your role in leading that change. And as we put all of these things together, it's a concentric circle, right? It's constant. It doesn't stop. Your people results are directly tied to your business results, which are directly tied to your people results. So you have to continue to work on both sides of that coin. You can't just do one space or the other. Because at the end of the day, it's people that do the work, and it's the work that keep the people. So that is kind of the mindset and the approach that we've taken at Frontier.
Had a slight change on our panelists, some problems with internet connectivity and work schedules. Jacqueline has agreed to step in today. She also just ran into some technical difficulties, and so she's joining us by phone. She won't have her slides available given the lateness of me adding her in to our programming this morning. Welcome, Jacqueline. I wanted to share a brief bio that she shared with me. After an early career in live music production, then a second in professional services operations and project staffing, Jacqueline discovered the field of organizational development. After earning her certification in OD and consulting, a professor invited her to work with him in his department focused on organization effectiveness, learning, and change. She spent 6 years building broad experience in the field and completing the full Masters of Science in Management and Organizational Behavior. She started with the earlier certification. Jacqueline currently serves in organizational change management at Metra. And with that, are you ready to take it away?
I am. Can you hear me okay? Because the sound coming through to me is a little blotchy.
We can hear you perfectly.
Great. Okay. So hello, everyone. Sorry about no slides. Part of that is because they'd be proprietary, because I'm going to speak back to the work that I did with my former director, because we were solidly in what we considered the strategy culture alignment space. And was with a small private organization, family owned, and he brought me in probably a year, maybe year or two after he had started. And the one thing from assessing that he'd been able to assess was just, if you look at leadership, and I've heard it, I'm going to be probably reiterating some things I've already heard from Kylie and Ken. So when you look at leadership, there are a couple components to it. And I think it was Jack Welch who talked about it. He said that, and what we've talked about here already, is there's first self-awareness and self-leadership, what I call personal leadership. And that's those kinds of things that we need to look at for the whole organization, because what I've also heard, will reiterate, is that you need to look all the way down to the level of the individual. How do the individuals contribute to the entire organization? And I kind of look at it from, you have individuals who make up the teams, who have leadership, different kinds of leadership depending on the ability of the team, and then that conglomeration of teams makes up the organization. And so leadership kind of needs to function at all levels. So people can have that personal leadership, and then people who lead need to have sort of other leadership. And we've heard that twice now. And so what we were looking at was, how do we start that combination? Both of the other panelists are much farther ahead than we were with the organization I was in. So it was really starting from the ground level. And how could we do that? So there was already an associate satisfaction survey in place. So we took that on and kind of modified it. And what we have to understand about those kinds of assessments and doing surveys is that they impact the value. So the questions that are asked become part of the culture. And the way that a question is asked. So we really had to think through, how are we asking the question, and how will it start to breed awareness of the core values that the company wants to espouse? that we kept that. We also developed ourselves a culture assessment, and it started with just an overall culture assessment. Where's the culture? What does it look like? What are the things we're looking at? And how, and then that morphed into a culture leadership assessment. So the culture assessment served as a baseline for where we got started, and then we used the culture leadership assessment for people to assess their leaders or their managers, and we were able to identify where leadership was aligned and where management may not be. And that's pretty much where it fell. People who were prepared to lead did well, were already doing well, and could tack to where the executive group wanted us all to go. People who worked more as managers and trying to manage people had a harder time with that. So that's where we were able to go. But what we did was we took the assessment results, and they were shared with everyone in some way. We had a high-level summary that went out on our VINs and our more broad communication. But then we sat with each of the managers, leaders, and talked about their results. And then, of course, some of them were like, well, I know that already, and this is what I'm going to do. And we're like, hold on a second. And what we did was drive the conversation with them and their teams to, again, address that relationship piece that's so important. That social interaction piece is very important in developing the culture, because that's where it derives from. And getting that conversation going between the leaders and their teams, getting more feedback, because the results told us one thing, but it was very broad, right? So we needed to have that conversation with the team members to really understand, so that each leader could really understand what was going on within their team and what drove their particular responses. And then we picked action items, we worked out action items, and then we're able to follow along and see where they were going, and we could tie that back to the next assessment, which we did. I think we did this, the associate satisfaction, which is kind of an engagement survey, how engaged are people, and then alternatively the culture survey. So the other thing that we brought into it was, if anybody's familiar with the ProSci ADCAR, it fits very well with sort of this development model that we worked from. And some of the first broad training, we did training around communication, teams, and this all speaks to that personal leadership piece that everybody needs in order for the organization to move in a direction. So it was, we looked at accountability. I think Kylie talked about that personal responsibility that everyone has. And so we layered that. So we had the communication, we had the team, working in a team or managing a team depending on our audience. And then the accountability piece, and we did some introducing of change, just talking about change, because obviously to get where we wanted to go, there was a lot of change that needed to happen. So it was really driving the conversation through things like lunch and learns. The change piece we did through lunch and learns. So different ways of just driving conversation throughout the organization. So between leaders and their teams, lunch and learns, and to both my other panelists' points, it starts with leadership. So nothing happened, no conversation happened until a discussion happened at the leadership, the executive level. So that's where it started. And we had the same idea of the executive branch needed to be modeling where they wanted to go. And that was a bit of a struggle, as it will be, because for people to really become aligned, it takes, it's work, and it's getting all those individuals in place. But everything cycled through leadership first, and then we brought it to management, and then we brought it down to teams. And we reiterated. So we did communication training throughout the organization over a couple of years, because we were a global firm and needed to get it out to other locations. And then we pulled together a leadership development institute to look at all these kinds of things. There were assessments. Self-awareness is key to leadership. So I love the neurological model. That's fantastic. But any kind of assessment tool that can be brought in for anyone to develop more self-awareness, that's the bottom line key piece to leadership. So we had a Leadership Development Institute that involved that. We also had people who worked together on a project. So the Leadership Institute went across a year. The team would come together. We had several teams. They would pick, strategies that the organization wanted to address, and developed those projects around that, did all the data research, and came together, and then the team presented their results to leadership and the rest of the group at the end of the year. We also had a Management Development Institute. So that spoke more to kind of reiterating from a management perspective, revisiting management communication, management team leadership, management accountability, leadership accountability, bringing all those pieces back, but looking at them from that because we had a lot of managers, as I mentioned, who struggled because they didn't come with the leadership capability that you need when you're managing people. So bringing people in and reiterating that and helping them to develop those skills after the fact of them taking on these leadership roles. So it's really, I think that's a less technical, it's a more sort of groundswell approach that we had to take. We didn't have, working without some great technology I've heard about here, and with a smaller organization.
Thank you so much for sharing today. I appreciate you filling in last minute. That's awesome. I do love that each of you touched on the topic of the importance of the self-awareness and the root of it. It's not one person in the organization. It's the collective group of leaders. So I love that you gave that full rounded overview. Wade Chancellor just asked if he could see Wade's last slide again. We can include them it'll be included in the recording of this event. But I can see if Patrick, do you mind sharing that? I'm going to stop my share real quick and see if he can come in.
No, not at all. Give me 1 second to bring it back.
All right, it's coming up. Was that what you're looking to see? Yeah, he had no questions. He just wanted to see it one more time. Thank you for sharing that. We're going to switch back. We have another question submitted. Kylie, you have a very robust program to develop leaders within your organization. Where did you start? It's too much to implement all at once, so I'm curious as to what action item you started with.
Yeah, much like Jacqueline, when I got here at Alivation, we didn't have anything. We didn't even have orientation program. Basically, when somebody new came on, it was, let's do the required legal paperwork that an accountant did and submitted it. They didn't even have HR. So starting from the ground up with nothing, it is tough. What we did is we really sat around with that leadership table and said, what are those core values? What are those core behaviors that we do every single day that we know we're going to continue to do? Once we had those, we took it to the managers and we really evaluated. We had to look at, do they align with those? If they don't, is it something we can help them get to? And if not, what do we need to do to support them? But really started with that self-awareness piece. So once we had the core values, going out to that manager group, leadership group, and we put them in the next level performance program, and we met once a week, and it was all discovery. Really just started with the discovery piece. A lot of them were challenged. They were executors, if you will. They were brilliant at just going throughout the day and getting stuff done. But if you had to get them to think bigger picture and inspire others, they just couldn't do it. And so really met weekly, really tough conversations, but built that trusting relationship with them that they began to open up, and they weren't fearful of sharing with their peer group. Once they built that connection, it was easier then to move into the other elements. But it probably took 8 months to even get to a spot where we said, okay, maybe we can take a next step forward after that discovery.
Another question Malcolm's asking, says he apologizes, but he caught the tail end of you discussing, Kylie, a leader working with his or her own emotional intelligence. Can you briefly kind of give a quick recap for him?
Yeah, emotional intelligence, there's a lot of different assessments out there. There's Travis Bradbury does some. There's Emotional Intelligence 2.0. It's a small book that you can take a basic assessment. We use one. We're fortunate enough to use MHS, which is a little more robust. But what it does is it tells you the areas that you are competent in, or that you can grow in, maybe where you're a little lower in terms of self-awareness, self-management, if you will, your interpersonal relationship with others. And then it also looks at basically sort of how you make decisions. And so, do you understand your emotions? Can you regulate them? Do you have good relationships? Do you know how to interact with others? Do you perceive reality as the way it is? A lot of people tend to be really low on reality testing, is what it's called. Which, as we know, the whole iceberg effect, the higher up, the less you know, right? How do you handle stress? How do you have empathy? Those sort of questions. So it's an assessment, and like I said, some of them have different components, but essentially the same sort of idea. But it is a very good glimpse into, okay, if I don't even understand my emotions and can't regulate them, how are those interactions going to be effective with others?
Did that cover all of your questions, Malcolm? No new questions have been entered in here. I think we've answered everything that's come through on chat as well as the Q&A. If you have any last minute questions, please let me know. Otherwise, we'll wrap up our program here. I wanted to say thank you so much to our panelists for taking the time to share your experience and knowledge and help us each grow and think about some of the leadership challenges that we're facing and maybe think about them in a little bit different way. Looking at EQ as a possible dissertation topic, that's Malcolm's response to asking you more. So he had a very specific reason for that. And then it looks like we had one more question come in through the Q&A, if you guys don't mind. Melissa's asking, trust seems to be a big component, building trust with the leadership team to implement the kinds of programs that will be effective and trust in frontline leaders. My question is to all, how do you build that trust?
Get out of your office.
Oh yeah.
It starts at the top. Our CEO here is very supportive of that, but 3 months, I did nothing but talk to people, understand them, make myself a fool in front of them. They saw my mistakes. They knew I was a real person. I don't know if I got anything accomplished other than meeting people.
Yeah, I would echo that too. And if you go to Patrick Lencioni's, right, the 5 dysfunctions of a team, the foundation is that vulnerability-based trust. It's looking at individuals for people, not for their position, and understanding that if I'm willing to be vulnerable and say, hey, look, I need support here, and I'm also willing to say, hey, look, you missed this or you failed that, and it's okay. Let's figure out how we move forward from that. Really focusing on that vulnerability-based trust and not predictive trust. It's a great workshop. It's a great book. If you haven't read it, it's kind of fundamental, right, to team development, but really focused again on that vulnerability-based trust. Like Kylie shared, relationships with people make a huge difference when they see you and you're just real, and leaders are willing to do the same. It makes a huge impact on the organization. So if you haven't looked at that, the 5 dysfunctions of a team, I would encourage you to look into it.
Yes, I reiterate that as well. And then the follow-up that talks about addressing those, and I forget the exact title, but there's a follow-up to it that takes you through ways to develop that trust on a team. And it speaks right to exactly what Patrick was talking about, is that vulnerability piece, which has to be modeled by leadership. It was funny at our organization, the there was this whole open door policy, right? I've got my doors open and nobody's coming to see me. And I heard recently at a gathering that he's still thinking, it's the same same group of people that come and see me. And it's because he knew them before he took over from his mom, and they had already developed that relationship. And so the answer is get out and develop relationships. When we are in power, when we are in leadership, we have a responsibility to do that, because many people have struggled with authority. And so we have to take the initiative to reach out to them first. And I liked Kylie's, whole being vulnerable and making mistakes, showing them it's okay to make mistakes as long as we are learning from them and doing something about them. But that modeling that thing, and that's why the self-awareness and self-development is so important for anyone, because when you move to that piece of leading others, you're modeling all those things that you have learned, and people are looking to you as a leader and how you operate. And just like we do with our parents growing up, we take what they do more than what they say. So it's that modeling piece and being vulnerable and being okay with making mistakes and learning from them, and making sure that is that people are aware of that, right? So being very conscious about the communication and the conversations that you're having that reveal what you're doing.
Okay, first, I think Jacqueline, right? I've been mispronouncing your name,
Jacqueline,
and I apologize.
No, that's okay, Jacqueline.
I apologize.
That's the French pronunciation.
I liked that when you're talking about self-awareness, and I think you'd called it reality testing, and Kylie had mentioned how you guys had done some videotaping. I'm wondering, Patrick, have you guys done anything along that line of where you kind of show somebody what's going on? I mean, have you had experience in those areas too?
Yeah, we've done everything from interventions to 360s. Our new 360 model, actually, that we built mirrors our Frontier Leadership Capabilities model. So you're rated based on the role that you serve in the organization on those 9 competencies. So we sit down, we do annual 360 reviews depending on the level that someone is in. We do, if you've never heard of it, it's the Cdr Assessment. It's a phenomenal tool that gets down to some really granular stuff on leadership character and behavioral risks, motivators, drivers. So depending on the role, we'll do that as well. But there is no better tool than direct feedback from your peers and those that you lead if you're in a leadership role. So anytime you've got the opportunity to put something like that into practice, it's a positive.
Any final comments from anyone before we end our program? From any of the panelists?
This is Jacqueline. I just say it was encouraging and validating to hear how we're all at different levels in the same space and going in the same direction. And I hope people heard those threads that I found so common amongst the work that we're all doing in different places.
Most definitely, I agree. Any final comments, Patrick or Kylie?
I would say, thank you, Nicole, for putting this together. I think we need more platforms like this, cross organization, regardless of who you work for. People are people, and the more time we as practitioners in this space can spend investing in one another and supporting one another, then the better every organization is going to get. So thank you so much for putting it together, and Kylie and Jacqueline, thank you for your shares. It was some great takeaways for myself.
Yes, thank you.
Here.
Don't hesitate to reach out offline if anybody has questions. I love brainstorming as well too. So
awesome. And please save the date. In a couple of weeks, we're going to talk about the return on investment of training, how just an understanding and relating of value back to the business KPIs. And we'll be talking to a variety of different industries to see kind of what they're looking at and how they're gaining that picture. Thank you again for joining us today, and I hope you have a great week. Thank you very much, panelists. Have a great day.
Yep. Thanks, Nicole. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you all.